So Ubora collects a lot of information, as you've seen, and one of the things that we've done this past year in FY10 is monitor the results of the annual operating priorities, and one of those priorities this past year was fundraising. And if we look at the measures of success for fundraising, you can see our total, our goal was to raise $532 million during FY10, and we greatly exceeded that at $570 million. So that includes country office revenue as well as private support. And if we look at private support, the goal for unrestricted was $64 million, and we came awfully close, raising $63 million. And if we look at the restricted side, the goal was $30 million, and we nearly doubled that at $55 million. Ubora also collects information about fundraising at the country offices. We gather information about grants and contracts and proposals that country offices have won. So last year, country offices learned about 700 grants, the results of them. They won 68% of that, for a total of $600 million over the life of all of those grants. And if you compare that to last year, you can see they are greater than the totals we had last year at 424 grants won and $450 million in lifetime of grants funded. We can also, through Ubora, we get information that the country offices submit through Scala, and we pull out some of the high-level information. And here you can see a chart of CARE's expense trends at the CARE USA country offices. You can see it's pretty much stable. Last year we had a dip, and I looked back, and most of that reason was because we didn't have the funding in Somalia, the agricultural commodities we had in 2009. And then if you look, it goes up in FY11 for our budget, and a lot of that has to do with the big global fund grant they have in Côte d'Ivoire. We can also break it down by the percent of the top donors. And so this chart shows, if you look at all the CARE USA country offices last year, 35% of their expenses were from U.S. government funding. Then private support, EU, and the Global Fund were just about 10%. We can also look closer on a regional basis. And the U.S. government is the top donor in 4 of the 6 regions. I put their lines in blue. So you can see ARMU is the top donor with nearly 60%, and then WARMU is the top donor at about a quarter of their funding. NIRMU and LACRIMU don't have the U.S. government as their top donor. NIRMU has the European Union, which makes up 40% of their funding, and the Global Fund is about a quarter of the funding, and LARMU. And you can see the blue line is much shorter for U.S. government in those 2 regions, with about 10% of NIRMU and about 7 or 8% in the Latin America region. So this is just some high-level information we get through Scala. The country offices are just submitting at once, but we pull it through and try to bring out some interesting information to share with you, and that may help you in your job. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Wanda, who's going to talk about emergency.
Everyone. Hi, Wanda. So you've seen us flip through videos and back and forth through PowerPoint. This segment is actually where you get to participate, okay? So in the spirit of going back to school, I want to see you guys energized and ready to go, okay? When you hear the word emergency response at CARE, what immediately comes to mind? Anyone? This is where you participate. Haiti. Anybody else? Pakistan. Well, you're absolutely right. Each year, CARE responds to numerous emergencies, and these emergencies can range anywhere from civil conflict all the way up to large-scale emergencies like Haiti, like Pakistan. And it's important for our country offices on either side of that conflict to be prepared. And so for this segment, we're going to talk about how our country offices are prepared for those emergencies. And we're going to start by taking a pop quiz. Okay. Our first question is, how many emergencies did CARE International respond to in FY10? A, 19. Anyone for 19? B, 7. C, 32. Or D, 90. I heard 2 from the room initially, but this says 90, from 7 to 90. Any guesses? Anyone for A? Raise your hand. Kind of low. B, anybody? C, anyone? 32. And D,
sounds like that to me.
Sounds like kind of feels like that too, right? Well, actually, the answer is 32. 32 emergencies that we responded to. Second question, how many of those emergencies were considered large scale? And large scale is like Haiti. 2. 2, 7, 1, or 13? 7. 2 or 1. 2, I hear 2 or 1. You're hedging your bets on 2 or 1. 7. Show of hands for 2. A. Show of hands for 7. B. Show of hands for 1. That's C. And some of you guys just aren't voting at all. Well, the answer is 7. You guys did very well. So as you can see, in FY10, CARE responded to several emergencies. And it's very important for us to make sure our country offices are prepared to respond to those emergencies. At this time, we're going to ask David Gassage-Veely, Deputy Director of EHA, to join us because he's going to share with us the tools that they use to manage and monitor our country offices as they prepare for David, I have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
And the first one is, what is the emergency scorecard? We hear about that quite often, but we're not quite sure what it is. Can you share with us what it is?
Sure. It's a system which we also call dashboard, emergency preparedness dashboard. It's a system that tells us how prepared our country offices are to respond to potential disasters and emergencies.
Okay. My second question is this readiness rating. What is the readiness rating? And how do we know if our country offices?
Yeah, the readiness rating is the single rating that is the most important for us to know from the scorecard. And basically, readiness rating is our preparedness, country office preparedness rating relative to the risk rating. So basically, it's not only that kind of preparedness only, but the preparedness towards the type of the disaster risk that they are facing.
In their country.
Yeah.
Okay. So according to this, the emergency scorecard was implemented in 2008, so about 2 years ago. All COs submit info to David's office twice a year where they actually calculate their rating. And then the readiness rating is their preparedness level divided by the risk level. Everyone got that? Raise your hand if you got that. Okay. Well, in light of that, one of the things that we like to do in Ubora is that we actually want to celebrate our country offices that in FY10 received an excellent and readiness rating. And those countries are Malawi, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Nepal, and Ecuador. Can we please give them a round of applause? And then, while we also collect the ratings, what's very important for us at Ubora is that we measure improvement from our country offices. So we're not just collecting numbers, we're actually watching how people are growing in different aspects of the areas where we collect information. And according to this slide, these are the country offices that had the greatest improvement, that showed the greatest improvement between June 2009, FY09, and June FY10. And those are Malawi, Tanzania, Benin, Caucasus, West Bank Gaza, and Liberia. Now, what's of particular note here is that Malawi had the greatest improvement of 2.97. But what you don't see is that they went from a rating of 0.13 to 3.10 to become the highest in among all the country offices, and that's pretty significant. David, what kinds of things will the country office have to focus on to increase their readiness rating?
Well, there are 3 major areas that the country office needs to focus on. Overall, there are about 70 indicators which are grouped into 3 areas. And the first area is, of course, the staffing, the capacity of our personnel in the country office. So in the staffing, we have indicators like the ERT, emergency response team, should be in place. The emergency response team should be operational. They should meet on quarterly basis, and they will carry out the capacity building plan. It's important that the country office emergency coordinator has experience to lead the type 2 of big emergencies. And also the country office has a focal point on technical side, which means the shelter, water, sanitation, and food security. So the second thing is that EPPs, basically emergency preparedness plan. Every country office should have emergency preparedness plan in place. And And there are many elements of the plan, but the most important thing is to have the response strategy in place before the emergency strikes. Very often what we do is when emergency strikes, then we kind of take our time to develop the response strategy. But the purpose of the preparedness planning is to make as many decisions as possible before the emergency. So if we have the strategy before the emergency strikes, if we know how to respond to the emergency beforehand, then we are much more likely to do a better job and faster. And the thirdly is to have systems and procedures in place. It's administration and procurement and HR and logistics and other systems. To have stockpiles in place, to know our contractors, to know our partners in advance, to have the warehouses ready, etc. So these are the three major areas that every country office needs to have in place to have high ratings like those.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Now we're going to allow you to listen to a audio clip of Martha Myers, who is the country director of West Bank Gaza. We spoke with her earlier this week for emergency preparedness plan and the tips that they use to make sure that they stay prepared, especially since they live in a chronic state of emergency.
What types of emergencies do you typically encounter?
West Bank Gaza operates in an environment of chronic low-grade emergency. Major disaster here is averted by huge international effort and expenditure, particularly in the Gaza Strip at this point in its history. However, we also have a regular litany of emergency spikes. These include things related to climate change, drought, and flood. But most dramatic, we have emergencies related to conflict, and what I'm going to talk about today really applies, I think, to any kind of emergency, but in particular the emergency that we responded to in the winter of 2008-2009, Israeli Operation Cast Lead, which was a military attack on the Gaza Strip, and some of the lessons learned.
Martha, can you share with us a few tips on how West Bank Gaza is able to effectively respond to these emergencies?
I think the two most important things in effectively responding to an emergency are that you have staff who know what they're doing and are positioned or can be deployed, and that you have access to resources. And the best resource of all is money. And it's interesting how little money can make a big difference. In the first 8 hours of Cast Lead, we spent about $20,000 on supplies for emergency rooms in Gaza who were flooded with casualties, and immediately ran out of everything because we had staff in place who knew what they were doing with medical supplies, had the relationships with the hospitals and the doctors, and who also had the relationships with medical vendors who happened to have stocks in their warehouses. We were able to respond quickly using our flexible funds. And we knew, because we have very good financial management here, we knew exactly how much was available to us without us getting into high-risk financial territory. So we could quickly do things that comforted people, helped people, saved lives, and created quite a profile for us. That profile then led donors to our doorstep who immediately provided us with more funding. Again, the staff were in place and knew what they were doing.